Hello everyone and welcome back to Chess Programming Game Design with me. So in the last lesson we started to work on the special moves, and we made the normal or special moves class and we worked with it. We went into the square, we changed a few things on how we do things. So yeah, I would recommend you watch that video to know where we're going with this. But today, as I mentioned, we're going to be working in the game manager mainly. So we are going to start off by simplifying what we do inside of our check selection method. By simplifying, I mean slightly breaking things down. So we have a few things that we do inside of this if statement. Firstly, we remove element. So what the for each loop, it just removes the element that is in the square. That's one thing we have. The other thing we have is we move a piece to a square. So that's number 2. And then the third thing we have is just everything that needs to happen at the end of a turn. So why don't we just make 3 methods, and then it's going to be much more easily readable. By making these methods, it's also going to make our life much easier for when we go on to the special moves, because we can just use a method and then not have to worry about what the method does specifically. So let's start off by making a method. We can make these private because nothing else needs to use them. It's going to be a void, private void, delete children. Something. I know it's a weird sounding name, but we know what it does. It's nothing weird. It is, however, going to require a what's it called? I can't remember. We need to pass something to it. This is going to be a square. So we need to pass a square to it, and we are going to call it the parent. Why not? The parent square, and then we are going to work on that. There we go. And now, instead of having this for each loop here, what we can do is just use this method to just replace this. Delete children of current square selection. There we go. And this is going to do what the for each loop would have done before by us passing it the current square selection. So that's all fine. Now let's move on to the move piece 2, is what I'm going to call the next method. Private void move piece 2. It's going to have 2 inputs. One of them is going to be piece and the other one is going to be square. So piece 2 move, and then square place to move 2, or something like that. You can name them whatever you want, as we know with methods. And then I believe that this is everything that we need to do. Last piece moved, so that's going to come under our other method. So I think that that's what I want to do. Let's just make sure. And yes, that is correct. Just we are going to treat this separately, but for now we can actually just leave it inside of here. I was just looking at where we should put this line, but we can just keep it where it is for now. We are going to have that. We're going to copy and paste all of these into here, but then we are going to change things so that they meet with this criteria. So the piece, current piece selection, piece to move is going to replace current piece selection, wherever that is, in all of these places. And then we are going to look at current square selection. And, oops, I meant to copy this. Current square selection is there, there, and there. And now we have replaced those. I believe that we should be fine. So we can just delete this and instead use our new method, move piece 2, using current piece selection and current square selection. Shift tab, and there we go. As I said before, we are going to just leave this for now as it is. Then we are going to copy these over and make a new method, which I am simply going to call private void end of turn stuff. It doesn't need any inputs, we just need to call it. And I'm going to copy it and then just replace everything that was in it. There we go. Now our game should still work the way it did before. Let's just make sure. With nothing changed, and we shouldn't be getting any errors either when we try to do it. Okay, it seems to be working fine. We haven't done en passant yet, so that's fine. We don't need to worry about why this pawn wasn't moved out of the way. But yeah, as you can see, nothing has changed. But it has made our life easier, because now we know what this stuff does. I am actually going to rename this to remove piece from, because it's slightly more appropriate for our purposes, because we are just removing a piece. It's not. It can be used to delete other elements as well, but we're only using it to remove pieces. And now we can move on to everything else. So we've simplified this to only 4 lines, whereas before it was all of these things combined. What we could do is maybe even create another function or method, normal piece movement, which doesn't require anything, and we just call this, and then instead of having to deal with all of this, we call that, oops, there we go, and then that sorts everything out for us. Why we're doing this? Well, because I'm going to want to expand on this if to add 5 more else ifs, for 2 for black pawn, 2 for white pawn, and 1 for king. The king is going to be for castling. The ones for pawn are going to be, well, black and white, as well as we're going to have the en passant and piece change. Those are the special moves. And so what we need to check is that we will see how we're going to check this, but I'm just going to say it now. We're going to need to check whether the move, the square which we want to move to, is going to be a special move or a normal move. So for that, we're going to want to make another method, which I am going to be calling his square special move. I'm just going to copy and paste it and then explain what it does. So it's a boolean, quite simple and self-explanatory. We're using it in an if statement why it's a boolean. Then what we pass it is a list of normal or special moves. We're going to get this list from the piece which we are moving, and we're going by using the current piece selection, and we're going to get the valid moves list, which each piece has, as you can see here. Next is square the element. So we are going to check whether this is inside of this and whether it's a special move or not a special move. And for this we are going to pass current square selection. Then we go into the for each loop. What it does is kind of similarly to what we did with the square last time, and does list contain element. I've done it in a similar way to that. We do for each normal or special move n, so we're looking through this list. If the valid move is the element and n.is special, so that means that if current square selection is equal to the element, or is equal to the square of n, i.e. one of the elements inside of this list, as well as it's special, then it's going to return true, i.e. it's going to return that it is special. Otherwise, if we've looked through all of these and this criteria isn't matched, then it just exits the for each loop and it returns false. So what we do now is we just copy this over, put it inside of here, and pass it what I just said we're going to pass it. So we pass current square selection, and we also pass current piece selection dot valid moves. And we want to check that that isn't true. So we put an exclamation point or a mark in front of it. Because if it is true, then we want to deal with it in different ways. So else if this is true. And we could, if we wanted to, check that this is true as well. So let me just copy this and show you what I mean. We could do this checking, however, oops, without the exclamation mark here. We could do this, however, if it's gotten to this point, then that means that these are, one of these, or both of them, are false. It's probably just going to be this one that's false, in our case. And so if this is false, then here it's going to be true, if this is true. And so we don't have to check for the second statement. So we can just delete it. However, what we are going to be checking is whether it's a white pawn, black pawn, and so on and so forth, to see, to know what we should be dealing with. So we are going to need multiple of these, so else if, and then we're going to add the extra selection. So we need 5 of these. That's 3, 4, oops, and 5. So one of them is going, 2 of them are going to be for the black pawn, 2 of them are going to be for the white pawn, and the 5th one is going to be for the king. So for the last part of this video, I am just going to fill these out. What we can actually do is, instead of having it as this kind of a chain, you can do it like this. However, you're going to need to put multiple statements inside of the else if. So instead, what I am going to do is check for this condition once, then go inside of here, shift tab this, put an if here, and we're not going to have to check for this, because if we've entered inside of here, then that means that this is true and that this is also false. Or no, that this is true and that it is a special move. And so we don't have to check for that each time. So the checking we are going to do inside of here is, first of all, for the white pawn en passant. So what we need to do then is check that the current piece selection is white pawn. So if it is a white pawn and the current square selection is on row 5, so if the current square selection is on row, is on this row, yep, that's what row 5 is, then it might be en passant. And if the current piece white pawn selection is, if the current piece selection is white pawn, then it also might be white pawn. We're going to make sure that we can make this inside of here, but, well, no, we've already made sure that that is en passant by our pawn, black pawn and white pawn moves. So if this is true, and it's a special valid move, then there's en passant that's supposed to happen, so we're supposed to take the piece behind the square. That's the checking for the en passant for the white move. Then we're going to do the same for the black en passant. I'm going to put it here. But because it's black's move, it's going to be on row 2, so 0, 1, 2. It's going to be on this row that they would need to click and move. Then we have the piece changing, if that's happening. That's going to happen if white wants to move to black's starting row, or if black wants to move to white's starting row. There we go. So if the selection is black pawn and the movement is to 0. Else if, then what if it's the king? And there we go. We probably could get away by putting else here. However, I want to be sure that this is correct. We can test it later, whether we can just get away with else. But sometimes it's better to leave it as else if, just in case an error pops up or something. So in the next lesson, what we're going to do is actually fill out some of these, or maybe even all of them, to do what we want them to do, and to actually do the move in the way we want it to. So for en passant, we want to move the pawn to where we want to move it, and then take the piece that's behind it, and so on. So I think I'm going to end the video here today. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, then please give me a like, share and subscribe. Tell me how I can improve down in the comments down below. I said down 3 times now. If you have any questions, do feel free to ask in the comments down below. That's the 4th time. And I will be happy to help as soon as possible. Until next time, thank you so much for watching and goodbye.